September 19, 1944, Hill 265 near Arracourt, Lorraine. At 745 hours, a thin layer of morning fog hung over the Lorraine countryside as the 113th Panzer Brigade maneuvered into their planned ambush positions. The brigade, equipped with 12 Panther tanks armed with the formidable 75mm Cashinon, awaited the approach of 5 American Sherman tanks. On paper, the situation appeared heavily skewed in favor of the Germans. The Panther's long-barreled gun could penetrate a Sherman's armor at ranges exceeding 2,000 meters, while its sloped frontal armor, 80 millimeters thick and angled at 55 degrees, yielding an effective thickness of roughly 140 millimeters, rendered Sherman fire almost useless except at dangerously close distances. Conversely, the Sherman, with only 50 millimeters of frontal protection, was highly vulnerable to the Panther's main gun at standoff ranges where counterattack was nearly impossible. Despite these apparent advantages, the ambush would quickly collapse. Within 4 hours, 8 of the 12 Panthers positioned on Hill 265 were destroyed, engulfed in flames and smoke. The 5 Shermans, commanded by Lieutenant Colonel Crichton Abrams of the 37th Tank Battalion, advanced across open terrain without suffering a single loss. By the close of September 19, the area surrounding Arracourt was strewn with 49 wrecked German tanks, while American casualties remained negligible. Over the subsequent 10 days, through September 29, the US's 4th Armored Division would either destroy or incapacitate roughly 200 German armored vehicles, losing only 48 of their own in the process, a ratio that defied conventional understanding of armored warfare and the supposed technical superiority of German designs. The events at Arracourt represented more than a mere battlefield defeat for the Wehrmacht. They shattered the long-held German assumption that superior engineering alone could dominate the battlefield. Instead, they encountered a coordinated system of warfare combining vehicles, logistics, and tactical doctrine into a seamless mechanism that consistently outperformed technically advanced individual tanks. This confrontation arose directly from Hitler's fury over the American breakout from Normandy. In early September 1944, as General Patton's Third Army surged across France, German High Command demanded an immediate counteroffensive aimed at halting the American advance and restoring German prestige. The hastily assembled 113th Panzer Brigade, supported by the 111th Panzer Brigade and units from the 11th Panzer Division, was tasked with striking the exposed American flanks in Lorraine. Under the command of Oberst Hans Heinrich Freiherr von Seckendorf, the 113th deployed a total of 90 armored vehicles, split evenly between Panthers and Panzer IVs, preparing to deliver what German strategists hoped would be a decisive blow. The 111th Panzer Brigade, under the leadership of Major General Heinrich Gunther von Schloff-Bronat, represented one of Germany's final operational reserves on the Western Front. These formations were assembled rapidly and suffered from inadequate training, a problem exacerbated by chronic fuel shortages. Despite these limitations, they were equipped with the Panther tank, a machine that, on paper, surpassed any armored vehicle fielded by the Allies. The Panther epitomized German engineering ideals, its 75mm K-42 LAS-70 gun-fired armor-piercing shells at velocities exceeding 1,000 meters per second. At typical combat distances, this weapon could pierce up to 140 millimeters of armor from 1,000 meters, granting it the ability to obliterate any Allied tank head-on. By comparison, the Sherman's 75mm gun could only penetrate roughly 88 millimeters, and even then, crews had to close within 100 meters to pose a credible threat to the Panther's frontal protection. German armored doctrine prioritized tank-on-tank duels at long ranges, relying heavily on technical superiority to dictate the outcome of engagements. Panther crews trained extensively at specialized schools, spending months honing their skills in long-range marksmanship, consulting detailed ballistic tables, and rehearsing the geometry of ideal ambush positions. In this framework, the Panther was more than a tank. It was the embodiment of a tactical philosophy centered on precision and firepower. Unbeknownst to the German commanders preparing their counterattack, the Americans had embraced a fundamentally different approach to armored warfare, one that minimized the relevance of a single tank's specifications. Colonel Bruce Clark, instrumental in shaping U.S. Armored doctrine at Fort Knox emphasized rapid maneuver, coordinated combined arms operations, and operational flexibility over the individual capabilities of any one vehicle. American doctrine treated tanks as elements within a broader combat system, integrating infantry, artillery, tank destroyers, and air support into cohesive fighting formations. Lieutenant Colonel Creighton Williams Abrams, Jr., commanding the 37th Tank Battalion, personified this philosophy in action. A West Point graduate of 1936, originally trained in cavalry before transferring to armor, Abrams viewed mechanized warfare not as contests of armored superiority, but as a contest of speed, initiative, and coordination. His battalion trained relentlessly in combined arms tactics, focusing on rapid target acquisition and firing while on the move rather than relying solely on long-range precision. The 4th Armored Division developed tailored methods specifically to counter Panther tanks. Recognizing that frontal attacks were virtually futile, American crews practiced flanking maneuvers, the use of smoke to obscure movements, and synchronized artillery support to suppress enemy armor while Shermans repositioned for lateral strikes. The Sherman's lighter frame and mechanical reliability, often considered disadvantages, were deliberately leveraged to enable faster, sustained operations and greater tactical flexibility. On September 18, 1944, the German counteroffensive commenced with the 113th Panzer Brigade advancing toward Arracourt, anticipating minimal opposition. Reconnaissance reports suggested only scattered American units, perhaps a few infantry companies, some tank destroyers, and a handful of Shermans. However, U.S. intelligence had far better insight than the Germans realized. Ultra intercepts had identified the German troop concentrations days before the assault. Artillery observation planes tracked every movement, providing precise data on German positions. As a result, American forces had a complete understanding of the advancing enemy, while German units moved forward under the illusion of encountering only weak resistance. This clash represented not merely a confrontation of tanks, but a collision of two fundamentally different doctrines, one prioritizing technological superiority and long-range dueling, the other emphasizing coordination, mobility, and the integration of combined arms. The outcome would hinge not on individual firepower alone, but on the execution of strategy, adaptability, and the ability to exploit tactical advantages. At 800 hours on September 19, 1944, a contingent of 15 Panther tanks from the 113th Panzer Brigade advanced toward Arracourt in standard tactical formation. The crewmen were unaware of the danger lurking ahead. For half an hour, American forward observers had been monitoring the German movement, meticulously plotting their positions on predetermined coordinates. As the Panthers crossed these points, a coordinated strike from 12 artillery batteries totaling 144 guns erupted simultaneously. The intensity and precision of the bombardment stunned the German crews. Unlike conventional shelling, this was a carefully orchestrated time-on-target strike, designed so that rounds from batteries positioned at varying distances and firing at different moments all landed at the same instant. In the opening, operated entirely by artillery fire rather than by enemy tanks, while the remaining crews pressed forward, visibly shaken by the relentless accuracy and destructive power of the American indirect fire. Later, as German forces secured Hill 265 overlooking Arracourt, they prepared to ambush a group of advancing Sherman tanks under the command of Captain Abram. Positioned approximately 1,200 meters away, a distance ideal for their main guns, the Panthers waited for the Americans. Their first shots missed, but before the German gunners could realign, all 5 Shermans fired in unison, deliberately targeting the ground ahead of the Panthers to generate clouds of smoke and dust, then dispersed into multiple positions. Within moments of the Panthers revealing their locations, American forward observers called in another wave of artillery. White phosphorus shells ignited near the German tanks, obscuring optics with thick burning smoke, while high-explosive rounds damaged tracks and vision ports. The Panthers, tanks engineered for long-range precision, suddenly found themselves disoriented and under constant bombardment. Using terrain that had been poorly scouted by the Germans, the Shermans maneuvered through depressions and other cover, emerging from 3 directions simultaneously. At distances below 500 meters, the Sherman's main guns could pierce the Panthers' 40mm side armor, highlighting a critical tactical advantage. Furthermore, the Sherman's hydraulic turrets allowed a full 360-degree rotation in just 15 seconds, whereas the Panthers' manually operated turret required roughly a minute to complete the same motion. At close range, this difference was decisive, as American crews trained to reload and fire within 4 seconds could deliver multiple rounds before the Germans had a chance to retaliate. One of the most thoroughly recorded engagements occurred near Lisi, where Captain William A. Dwight's Sherman platoon confronted several Panther tanks. According to the official after-action report, Sergeant Donald Decker, Dwight's gunner, eliminated 4 Panthers in rapid succession at ranges under 800 meters. Decker's account, preserved in military archives, offers detailed tactical insight. We turned a corner near a small wooded area and spotted 3 Panthers about 600 yards out. They were moving laterally toward us, but we managed to get the initial shots off. I fired 3 armor-piercing rounds into the side of the first tank before it could bring its gun to bear. The second I struck from the rear as it attempted to retreat. The third managed to fire a single shot which went high, and we quickly neutralized it. This episode underscores the combination of artillery coordination, terrain exploitation, and rapid firing proficiency that allowed Shermans to overcome the technically superior Panther tanks, demonstrating how tactical innovation and crew training could offset material disadvantages in armored warfare. The engagement at Arracourt highlighted the distinct advantage of American forces in rapid response combat. Unlike German crews, who adhered to a strict multi-step firing routine where the commander identified the target and estimated the range, the gunner calibrated the sights, and the loader selected the proper ammunition, American tank crews relied on instincts honed through countless drills. They intentionally prioritized swiftness over long-range precision, recognizing that at Arracourt, typical combat distances of 500 to 800 meters demanded speed above pinpoint accuracy. On September 20th, the Germans initiated a significant offensive, deploying elements from both the 113th and 111th Panzer Brigades. Oberst von Seckendorf personally spearheaded the assault, leading 40 Panther tanks alongside supporting infantry. Initially, the German advance appeared to gain momentum. Tanks moved under the cover of morning fog, catching several American outposts off guard. However, the U.S. forces quickly demonstrated superior coordination and tactical organization. Within minutes of initial contact, every American unit in the area had a clear understanding of German positions. The Sherman tanks were linked to higher headquarters through efficient radio networks, enabling rapid communication and coordinated responses. Forward artillery observers embedded with tank units immediately called in suppressive fire, neutralizing threats before they could consolidate. As the morning mist lifted, air support from the 19th Tactical Air Command became decisive. Major Charles "Bazooka" Charlie Carpenter, piloting an L-4 Grasshopper observation plane equipped with 6 bazookas, directly engaged enemy armor, creating additional pressure on the German formations. In a post-action report published by Stars and Stripes on September 25, Carpenter noted how the German crews began maneuvering evasively as soon as his presence was detected, illustrating the disruptive effect of even small, agile aerial units against armored columns. The combined use of tanks, artillery, and air power established overlapping fields of fire that severely constrained German movement. Panthers that paused to fire on Shermans were subjected to artillery strikes. Advancing Panthers faced attacks from fighter bombers, and those attempting to seek cover were flanked by fast-moving tank destroyers. By September 20, the German offensive had begun to crumble under these pressures. Oberst von Seckendorf, adhering to traditional German leadership practices by remaining at the front, was killed when artillery destroyed his command Panther. His death instantly disrupted the 113th Panzer Brigade, as subordinate officers trained primarily to execute orders rather than take independent action were left uncertain how to proceed. The following day, September 20, General Major von Schloff-Bronat of the 111th Panzer Brigade was also killed in combat. Losing both brigade commanders within 2 days effectively dismantled German command and control, creating a vacuum of leadership. In contrast, American doctrine encouraged adaptability at all levels of command. When senior officers fell, junior leaders immediately assumed responsibility, ensuring the continuity of operations. Captain James Leach of Company B, 37th Tank Battalion, exemplified this principle on September 22nd at duels. Despite his radio being disabled by a near miss, his platoon leaders independently executed the battle plan. In the ensuing engagement, 7 of Leach's Shermans eliminated 17 German tanks while sustaining only a single loss, a performance that earned him the Distinguished Service Cross. As skies cleared between September 21st and 23rd, American air superiority became increasingly decisive. Coordinated attacks from above, combined with the flexible, instinct-driven tactics of American tank crews and robust artillery support, systematically dismantled the German advance. The events at Arracourt thus underscored not only the tactical and technological advantages of American forces, but also the critical value of decentralized command and rapid decision-making in modern armored warfare. Under the leadership of Major General Leward Pete Sisada, the 19th Tactical Air Command reached a level of proficiency in close air support that German forces found nearly impossible to counter. P-47 Thunderbolts, armed with bombs and rockets, executed relentless sorties, saturating the battlefield with continuous waves of air attacks. Coordination between aerial and ground elements was exceptionally refined. Forward air controllers, embedded within Sherman tanks, utilized the same maps and grid coordinates as infantry and army units, enabling them to rapidly direct airstrikes when ground units encountered stiff opposition. Fighter bombers could be vectored to precise targets within minutes, while the P-47 seconds were able to differentiate between friendly and enemy forces at high velocity. U.S. armor highlighted their positions using colored panels and smoke signals, allowing aircraft to strike with minimal risk of fratricide. German records captured after engagements emphasized the constant psychological strain of being under near-constant aerial assault. Panthers, engineered to dominate land battles, were highly vulnerable from the air. Their 16mm top armor, sufficient against indirect artillery fire, offered no real protection against direct hits from 500-pound bombs or 5-inch rockets. Even near misses could disrupt operations, damaging optical devices, jamming turrets, or injuring crew members through concussive force. The presence of American aircraft created an ever-present sense of surveillance and imminent danger, forcing German tank crews to limit movement to night or adverse weather conditions to avoid air attacks. A striking example of this tactical advantage occurred on September 25 at Juval. Company C of the 37th Tank Battalion, commanded by Captain Spencer, confronted approximately 30 German tanks advancing across open terrain, while Spencer's unit had only 7 functional Shermans. Rather than engaging in a straightforward confrontation, Spencer executed a methodical defensive strategy. His tanks were positioned in hull-down formations behind a low ridge, exposing only their turrets. As the Germans advanced, the Shermans opened fire selectively, aiming not merely to destroy but to disorganize and manipulate the enemy formation. Simultaneously, artillery units fired smoke rounds to obscure the battlefield, complicating the German advance. Exploiting the confusion, Spencer dispatched 3 Shermans along an unobserved flanking route through a narrow valley. Emerging on the enemy's flank at close range, they eliminated 8 Panther tanks in a matter of minutes. Confronted from multiple directions and blinded by smoke, the German formation disintegrated. Total losses for the Germans amounted to 17 tanks destroyed and 8 damaged, while the Americans suffered minimal damage, with 1 Sherman quickly repaired. By September 24, this engagement highlighted structural weaknesses in German armored doctrine. Despite the Panthers' superior technical specifications, it was plagued by mechanical vulnerabilities that were exacerbated under combat conditions. The U.S. Army's Ballistic Research Laboratory later analyzed 30 engagements, concluding that Shermans maintained a 3.6-to-1 kill ratio over Panthers not because of greater firepower, but due to higher operational availability. Panther tanks frequently suffered final drive failures, transmissions could not withstand the strain of the vehicle's 45-ton mass, and the interleaved road wheel system, though efficient in weight distribution, clogged with mud in Lorraine's wet terrain and could freeze, immobilizing the tanks entirely. In contrast, the Sherman's straightforward mechanical design became its most reliable asset. These tanks could operate for hundreds of miles between major servicing, track tension could be corrected in minutes, engines replaced in as little as 4 hours, and transmissions rarely failed thanks to ample design tolerances for the 33-ton weight. Standardized parts allowed quick replacement in the field, and U.S. maintenance teams routinely performed feats that appeared impossible to German forces. During the Battle of Arracourt, the operational effectiveness of the 37th Tank Battalion was largely sustained by its maintenance platoon. Led by seasoned non-commissioned officers trained at Fort Knox, the unit ensured that nearly 90% of the Sherman tanks remained combat-ready throughout the engagement. In contrast, German armored units struggled to maintain even half of their vehicles in a serviceable condition. By September 26, mechanical failures had sidelined more Panthers than direct combat, highlighting how logistics, rather than tactical maneuvering, played the decisive role in the battle. Both sides confronted acute shortages of fuel as their supply chains extended across the French countryside, yet the American response demonstrated remarkable adaptability. General Patton's Third Army imposed strict rationing, with armored formations receiving only 25,000 gallons daily despite needing 75,000 for optimal operations. Rather than crippling the American advance, this limitation spurred inventive solutions. The Red Ball Express, a now legendary truck convoy system, delivered approximately 12,000 tons of material each day over routes stretching more than 300 miles. When official fuel allocations proved inadequate, Patton authorized unconventional measures. Units dispatched foraging teams to acquire fuel from other commands, ensuring operational momentum was maintained. The German supply situation was far more precarious. Newly assembled panzer brigades had been promised sufficient fuel and ammunition, yet reality fell far short of expectations. Panthers consumed roughly 2.5 gallons of fuel per mile off-road, meaning a full 200-gallon tank allowed only about 80 miles of cross-country travel. Persistent Allied air attacks on supply lines, combined with severe disruption of fuel production due to strategic bombing, left many German tanks immobilized for lack of fuel. Ammunition shortages compounded the problem. American Shermans carried diverse loads including armor-piercing, high-explosive, and white phosphorus rounds, permitting flexible responses against a range of targets. Continuous artillery resupply from Normandy depots further reinforced this advantage. German Panthers, on the other hand, relied primarily on armor-piercing shells, limiting their ability to engage infantry or softer targets, and had no means to resupply under combat conditions. The devastating impact of American artillery was fully realized on September 26, when German forces launched another large-scale assault. The 4th Armored Division, supported by higher echelon artillery units, could concentrate over 150 guns on a single objective within minutes. This capability was underpinned by the revolutionary American fire direction system. Forward observers, equipped with radios and accurate maps, transmitted target coordinates to fire direction centers, where pre-calculated firing tables and mechanical computers converted the information into precise firing orders. Multiple batteries could fire simultaneously so that shells struck their targets at the same instant, a technique known as time on target. German troops, accustomed to the comparatively sparse and poorly coordinated artillery of the Eastern Front, were demoralized by both the volume and precision of American fire. Assembly points and troop concentrations were relentlessly bombarded, and any daylight movement invited immediate destruction. On this single day, the 4th Armored Division's artillery alone fired more than 15,000 rounds. German artillery, limited to a handful of guns with meager ammunition, could offer only intermittent counterfire, which was quickly located and neutralized by American sound-ranging systems. The engagement also showcased the effectiveness of American tank destroyer doctrine. The 704th Tank Destroyer Battalion, equipped with mighty Hellcats armed with 76mm guns, executed operations according to the seek, strike, and destroy philosophy developed at Camp Hood, Texas. Unlike the heavily armored Panther, the mighty prioritized speed and maneuverability, achieving top speeds of 55 miles per hour, the fastest tracked vehicle of the war, while retaining sufficient firepower to neutralize enemy tanks. On September 27, a platoon under Lieutenant Edwin Leiper demonstrated this doctrine with textbook precision. Hidden within a tree line, they allowed a column of German tanks to advance past them before striking from the rear where the enemy's armor was thinnest. In just 12 minutes, Leiper's platoon eliminated 5 Panthers and 3 Panzer Fs, relocating immediately afterward to avoid return fire, and remarkably, none of the Miteens were damaged. The contributions of tank destroyers extended beyond their immediate kills. By striking decisively and unpredictably, they disrupted German maneuvering, forcing armored formations to adopt overly cautious tactics and diminishing the effectiveness of remaining German firepower. The combination of sustained American tank readiness, innovative logistics, overwhelming artillery, and highly mobile tank destroyers underscored a fundamental lesson of the Battle of Arracourt. Success on the modern battlefield depended as the presence of Mighteen tank destroyers significantly constrained German armored movements, forcing their crews to maintain constant vigilance over their flanks and rear positions. This defensive requirement slowed the momentum of German advances and disrupted the cohesion of their formations. The remarkable speed of the Mighteen allowed American units to react to emerging threats faster than German reserves could capitalize on any breakthroughs. By the conclusion of the engagement, the 704th Tank Destroyer Battalion reported 39 confirmed enemy tanks destroyed while losing only 4 Miteens. The climax of the battle occurred on September 29, 1944, when General Hasso von Manteuffel, recognized as one of Germany's most proficient panzer commanders, personally led the final major offensive. Manteuffel had taken command on September 27, tasked with reorganizing the shattered German brigades, bringing both experience and tactical acumen to the struggling formations. The German assault commenced at 600 hours, featuring the remaining operational Panther tanks, around 30 in number, moving alongside infantry from the 11th Panzer Division. Despite their material disadvantages, the attack displayed tactical professionalism, effectively utilizing terrain and maintaining coordination between armor and infantry elements. However, the American defense proved overwhelming. Colonel Bruce Clark, commanding Combat Command A, had anticipated the German assault through intelligence intercepts, US. Armored units were strategically positioned in pre-prepared defensive setups, with artillery pre-registered on likely avenues of enemy advance. As the Germans entered the designated kill zones, destruction was systematic and ruthless. Artillery fire isolated German infantry from their tank support, while tank destroyers struck from the flanks and Shermans dominated the center. With the morning fog lifting, P-47 Thunderbolts added substantial aerial firepower, intensifying the chaos. By midday, Manteuffel's offensive had collapsed entirely, with 22 German tanks destroyed or abandoned, and the surviving forces retreating toward Germany. The overall losses for the German forces at the Battle of Arracourt were catastrophic. Starting with 262 tanks and assault guns, only 62 vehicles remained operational, a staggering 76% loss rate. The 113th Panzer Brigade was rendered ineffective, while the 111th Brigade suffered similar devastation. Even the veteran 11th Panzer Division was reduced to roughly the size of a regiment. In contrast, American losses were markedly lighter. The U.S. 4th Armored Division lost 48 tanks in September 1944, including 25 tanks and 7 tank destroyers during the Arracourt engagements. Many damaged U.S. vehicles were swiftly repaired and returned to the front lines. Crew survivability was relatively high, aided by the Sherman's design, which included more accessible escape hatches and an internal layout that facilitated rapid evacuation. Overall, the kill ratio of approximately 3.61 in favor of U.S. forces defied German expectations. The apparent superiority of the Panther, both in armor and firepower, was decisively nullified, not through direct tank-to-tank engagements but through the Americans' integrated combined arms approach. Superior tactical flexibility, well-maintained logistics, and overwhelming artillery and air support were decisive factors. Following the battle, U.S. Army after-action assessments produced critical insights into armored warfare that would influence doctrine for years to come. The Armored Force Board at Fort Knox meticulously compiled reports from every unit involved, constructing a detailed and comprehensive understanding of contemporary armored combat operations. The battle demonstrated that raw technical specifications alone did not dictate the results of armored engagements. Despite the Panther tank's superior firepower and armor protection, these advantages were largely neutralized when American forces refused to engage under German-preferred conditions. By leveraging coordinated artillery barrages to suppress enemy positions, employing aircraft for precision strikes from above, and executing flanking maneuvers, American units were able to offset the Panthers' technological edge. The confrontation highlighted that tactical application and battlefield ingenuity could outweigh purely mechanical superiority. Furthermore, mechanical dependability proved far more critical than peak performance figures. A Sherman tank that could remain operational day after day provided far greater value than a Panther capable of higher speed or firepower but prone to frequent breakdowns. Continuous availability multiplied effective combat strength in ways that armor thickness or gun caliber could not achieve. This emphasis on sustained operational capacity shaped the way American armored forces approached long-term engagements. Equally decisive was the proficiency and adaptability of the crews themselves. American tank teams, molded through standardized and rigorous instruction at Fort Knox, exhibited consistent competence across all operational roles. They could seamlessly coordinate with infantry, artillery, and air support, adjusting to shifting conditions without needing micromanagement. German crews, increasingly inexperienced due to attrition and accelerated training programs, were unable to match this institutionalized efficiency, which translated directly into battlefield effectiveness. Logistics emerged as a foundational determinant of operational potential. The U.S. forces' ability to maintain uninterrupted supply lines providing fuel, ammunition, and spare parts even along a 400-mile logistical chain enabled continuous and flexible maneuvering. In contrast, German units, constrained by insufficient resupply, gradually lost tactical freedom. Over time, their operational limitations escalated to the point where immobility made defeat inevitable. Lieutenant Colonel Creighton Abrams, whose leadership was pivotal throughout the engagement, reflected on the battle in his after-action report. He stressed that the American victory was not attributable to a single factor, but rather to the disciplined and integrated use of combined arms doctrine. His 37th Tank Battalion demonstrated that aggressive, coordinated actions supported by both artillery and air power could overcome opponents who were individually superior on paper. Abrams would later ascend to Chief of Staff of the U.S. Army, and the lessons from Arracourt profoundly influenced American armored doctrine throughout the Cold War. The Mon Abrams tank, later named in his honor, incorporated these principles by prioritizing reliability, crew survivability, and system integration rather than emphasizing only raw performance metrics. From the German perspective, General Hasse von Manteuffel offered a candid post-war assessment. He concluded that Arracourt exposed critical flaws in German tactical thinking. The Wehrmacht doctrine, which prized technical superiority and individual combat prowess, proved insufficient against the Americans' methodical and integrated approach to warfare. U.S. forces had effectively industrialized combat operations, transforming battles into processes where organizational efficiency, logistics, and preparation were decisive. Arracourt became a testament to the power of systematic planning and intelligence. Intelligence played a central role in the American advantage. Ultra intercepts provided early warning of German troop movements, while reconnaissance conducted by armored cavalry and light aircraft maintained a continuous flow of tactical information. The integration of diverse intelligence streams created an unprecedented level of situational awareness on the battlefield. Colonel Oscar Coe, the G2 intelligence officer of the Third Army, pioneered techniques to synthesize data from multiple sources. His team combined intercepted communications, aerial observation, prisoner interrogation, and captured documents to form comprehensive assessments of German intentions. At Arracourt, U.S. commanders frequently had knowledge of enemy plans before German lower-level units received their orders. This informational edge significantly amplified American combat effectiveness. Foreknowledge of German attack directions allowed for optimal reserve deployment, while insights into fuel shortages enabled tactics that forced the enemy into exhausting maneuvers, further degrading their operational capability. In summary, the Battle of Arracourt underscored that success in modern warfare depended on reliability, training, coordination, logistics, and intelligence integration rather than solely on the technical sophistication of individual weapons. The American approach demonstrated that organized, informed, and adaptable forces could prevail against opponents with superior machinery, fundamentally shaping the principles of armored warfare for decades to come. The American forces' understanding of German mechanical vulnerabilities enabled a proactive, relentless approach that significantly disrupted enemy recovery and maintenance efforts. Behind the front lines, units tasked with keeping vehicles operational played a less glamorous but indispensable role. Among them, the 126th Ordnance Maintenance Battalion, assigned to support the 4th Armored Division, executed feats of mechanical efficiency that proved critical throughout the engagement. Operating from forward positions, sometimes under sporadic artillery fire, maintenance teams ensured that American armored vehicles maintained exceptionally high operational readiness. In a 1945 interview with Yank magazine, Master Sergeant John Fulner, who led a maintenance platoon, detailed their methods. "We had organized maintenance like a well-oiled factory. Track repairs took about an hour, engines could be swapped in 4, and transmissions replaced within 6 hours. Spare parts were stockpiled at every level company, battalion, and division. If a vehicle failed, we could restore or replace it within a single day," Fulner explained. This efficiency meant that tanks damaged in combat could return to battle almost immediately. A Sherman knocked out on a Monday might be operational by Wednesday. By contrast, German Panther tanks requiring specialized tools and limited spare components often remained out of action for extended periods if recovery was even possible under the pressure of American artillery and airstrikes. Combat readiness was also strongly influenced by medical support, an area where the Americans maintained a decisive edge. The 4th Armored Division's medical battalion could triage, stabilize, and prepare casualties for surgery within an hour, dramatically improving survival rates in what was known as the Golden Hour. Tank crews faced particularly severe injuries, burns, traumatic amputations, and blast trauma demanded immediate and specialized care. American doctrine prioritized surgical units positioned close to the front lines, staffed by specialists. Supplies such as plasma, morphine, and sulfur-based drugs were available even at the company level, and while helicopter evacuation was still experimental, it enabled rapid removal of critically wounded personnel who might otherwise have died awaiting ground transport. The psychological effect of this comprehensive medical infrastructure cannot be overstated. American tank crews fought aggressively, confident that injuries would not be fatal. In contrast, German tankers, aware of the limited medical support and uncertain evacuation prospects, often exercised greater caution. This assurance in battlefield care translated directly into tangible tactical advantages. Weather conditions also had a multifaceted impact on operations at Arracourt. Morning fog from September 18th to 21st initially seemed to favor German maneuvers by concealing their approach and reducing the effectiveness of American artillery observation. However, the same fog neutralized the Panthers' long-range firepower, compelling engagements at distances where Shermans could effectively operate. Once the skies cleared between September 21st and 23rd, American advantages expanded dramatically. Clear weather enabled overwhelming air support and precise artillery targeting, while the drying autumn terrain improved mobility for the lighter Sherman tanks. The Panthers, with heavier ground pressure, continued to struggle. When rain returned from September 24th to 26th, mud hampered German movements even further. The Panthers' interleaved road wheels, designed to distribute weight, became clogged and froze overnight, immobilizing several tanks. Shermans, equipped with simpler track systems, were more readily able to free themselves or undergo rapid field repairs. American superiority in communications further reinforced their battlefield dominance. The 4th Armored Division simultaneously operated multiple radio networks, including command, fire support, logistics, and air support channels. Each Sherman tank carried 2 radios, allowing crews to monitor several frequencies at once. The SCR 528 radio offered reliable voice communication over distances exceeding 10 miles, while the SCR 506 allowed coordination with supporting units. These FM systems resisted interference and eavesdropping, giving American commanders secure, real-time coordination that German forces could not match. German radios, fewer in number and limited in range, frequently broke down under combat conditions. Most Panthers were equipped with the Fu-5 set, which had an effective range of just 2 miles, leaving German units often isolated during critical moments. In sum, the combination of meticulous maintenance, rapid medical support, adaptive responses to weather, and superior communications created a multiplier effect that sustained American operational effectiveness. While German tanks were formidable in isolation, systemic vulnerabilities in recovery, medical care, mobility under adverse conditions, and coordination meant that the U.S. armored forces consistently leveraged these advantages to maintain momentum on the battlefield. During the Battle of Arracourt, the elimination of German command tanks became a critical turning point. Once these key vehicles were neutralized, American gunners could focus on secondary targets, while German units rapidly lost coordination and often could no longer communicate at all. This breakdown in communications accelerated the disintegration of German tactical responses, leaving their formations vulnerable and disorganized. The engagement at Arracourt underscored the payoff from the United States' heavy investment in systematic military training. Fort Knox, home to the Armored Force School, had developed what was arguably the most thorough tank crew training program in the world. Every American tanker deployed to Arracourt had completed a rigorous regimen, 17 weeks covering both basic and advanced individual skills, 13 weeks dedicated to team-oriented crew operations, and an additional 8 weeks in combined arms unit exercises. These were supplemented with extensive live fire drills where crews fired full ammunition allocations and detailed technical training on maintenance procedures for every component of their tanks. This meticulous preparation fostered a culture of standardized competence. Any American crew could integrate seamlessly with another unit, confident that everyone followed identical procedures and tactical doctrines. Consequently, the loss of one or more crew members, though tragic, did not compromise operational capability because remaining personnel were cross-trained to perform multiple roles. In stark contrast, by 1944 German armored units were grappling with serious training deficits. Chronic fuel shortages restricted practical driving experience, and ammunition scarcity severely limited gunnery practice. Panther crews tasked with operating highly complex tanks often received minimal preparation due to the hurried formation of new units. Many German crews at Arracourt had accumulated less than 100 hours of actual tank operation compared with American teams whose experience exceeded 1,000 hours. Arracourt cannot be examined in isolation. It must be contextualized within the broader strategic collapse Germany faced in September 1944. Across all fronts, the German Wehrmacht was faltering. The Soviet Union had shattered Army Group Center and was advancing toward German borders. Allied forces had liberated much of France and Belgium, while relentless strategic bombing crippled German industrial capacity. The defection of Romania severed critical oil supplies, and the offensive at Arracourt represented one of the few remaining German attempts to regain momentum in the West. Its failure confirmed that Germany could no longer conduct large-scale offensives. The destruction of Panther tanks and the loss of experienced crews, irreplaceable at this stage, hastened the overall collapse of German armored forces. For the Americans, the battle confirmed the effectiveness of their integrated approach to warfare. The combination of mass industrial production, disciplined and standardized training, advanced technological integration, and flexible tactical execution had proven superior to the German model. Arracourt provided a clear demonstration that American methods could prevail against any adversary, reinforcing doctrines that would shape U.S. military thinking for decades. The American victory at Arracourt was inseparable from the industrial framework that enabled it. The Detroit Tank Arsenal, later called the Fisher Tank Arsenal, exemplified the U.S. production philosophy. Completed in just 6 months, the facility was capable of producing 1,000 tanks per month by 1944. The production system prioritized reliability and interchangeability over pushing technical limits. Each Sherman tank consisted entirely of standardized, interchangeable parts. Transmissions were identical, engines could be swapped freely, and maintenance units could stock components with certainty of compatibility. German tank production, in contrast, was plagued by constant modifications that complicated assembly and maintenance. Panthers manufactured at different plants or even at different times in the same factory could contain incompatible parts. This pursuit of technical perfection became a logistical liability, especially as German industry collapsed under sustained Allied bombing. By September 1944, American factories were turning out 2,000 Shermans per month, compared with fewer than 400 Panthers from Germany. This 5-to-1 production advantage, combined with the Sherman's superior reliability, ensured overwhelming numerical superiority at the tactical level. At Arracourt, local force ratios often reached 3-to-1 in favor of the Americans, even against theoretically concentrated German formations. Ultimately, the Battle of Arracourt illustrates how preparation, training, and industrial capacity converge to produce decisive outcomes. It highlights the stark contrast between the American model, which emphasized standardization, redundancy, and scalable effectiveness, and the German approach, which increasingly suffered from shortages, inexperience, and logistical fragility. The engagement confirmed that systematic preparation and industrial might could decisively shape battlefield results, a lesson that continued to influence military strategy well into the late 20th century. Beyond mere numbers and battlefield diagrams lies the stark human reality of armored warfare. Tank combat was far from the tidy mechanical duels often depicted in books or films. It was a chaotic, terrifying ordeal defined by fire, explosions, and the constant presence of death. At Arracourt, both American and German tank crews faced conditions of extreme peril, demonstrating remarkable courage amid relentless danger. The Sherman tank, despite numerous battlefield successes, remained highly vulnerable. A single shell from a Panther could ignite its ammunition stores, turning the interior into a blazing trap and giving the crew only moments to flee. This vulnerability earned the Sherman the grim nickname Ronson, after the cigarette lighter famed for lighting the first time every time. German crews confronted equally harrowing threats. A Panther struck by white phosphorus would fill with noxious smoke, forcing soldiers to decide between suffocation inside the tank or risking exposure to enemy machine gun fire during evacuation. Tank commanders, often positioned with open hatches to improve visibility, were particularly exposed to artillery bursts that showered deadly shrapnel into their turrets. Injuries were severe and widespread. Burns from flaming fuel or hot metal were common. Traumatic amputations caused by shell fragments occurred frequently, and concussive blasts could result in lasting brain damage even without visible wounds. Period medical treatment struggled to address these injuries effectively. Yet amid this extreme violence, acts of compassion and humanity persisted. American medics often attended to German casualties alongside their own. Tank crews risked their lives to pull enemy soldiers from burning vehicles. Civilians in France, despite years of occupation and suffering, offered aid to wounded combatants on both sides, underscoring the persistence of empathy even in the midst of war. The Battle of Arracourt also produced a significant number of German prisoners, whose interrogations provided invaluable intelligence. Conducted in accordance with the Geneva Conventions, these interviews revealed widespread German logistical and morale problems. Captured crews recounted fuel shortages that restricted tactical options, minimal training due to rationed fuel, and mechanical failures that rendered nearly half their vehicles inoperable before combat. Above all, they were consistently struck by the Americans' material advantages: overwhelming artillery, relentless air support, and seemingly limitless ammunition. The treatment of prisoners by American forces followed strict, humane protocols, providing medical care, sufficient nourishment, and protection from harm. This approach often surprised German soldiers who were accustomed to the harsh practices of the Eastern Front, and it facilitated the collection of detailed intelligence. Knowledge of German fuel constraints allowed American commanders to strike when enemy tanks were immobilized. Awareness of mechanical failures encouraged aggressive maneuvers that prevented repairs, while insight into casualties among German officers highlighted leadership gaps ripe for exploitation. The battle itself left the surrounding French countryside devastated. The small town of Arracourt, long under German occupation, found itself at the center of violent clashes during liberation. The town's mayor later recounted the overwhelming scene: the thunder of constant artillery, the relentless roar of tanks and aircraft overhead. Numerous homes were destroyed, yet the townspeople understood the chaos signaled the end of occupation. The sight of destroyed German armor confirmed that the Americans had prevailed. Civilian losses during the conflict were substantial, though exact figures remain elusive. Artillery barrages and armored assaults made little distinction between enemy positions and residential areas, resulting in widespread destruction. The town of Arracourt itself was exchanged between opposing forces multiple times, each occupation leaving the settlement further in ruins. Despite the heavy toll, post-war interviews reveal that most inhabitants viewed their eventual liberation with appreciation, recognizing the strategic importance of their suffering. Members of the French resistance played a pivotal role in supporting American operations. They monitored German troop movements, pinpointed supply depots, and provided guidance through the local terrain, creating an intelligence network that had developed over years of occupation. This human-sourced information offered the Americans tactical advantages far beyond what could be obtained through maps or aerial reconnaissance alone. The significance of the Battle of Arracourt extended well beyond immediate battlefield outcomes. It was subsequently incorporated into the curriculum at the United States Army Command and General Staff College, where its operational lessons were studied by aspiring officers. The coordinated use of infantry, armor, artillery, and air support at Arracourt became a model for future American combined arms operations. The encounter also influenced armored vehicle design. While both German and Soviet doctrines prioritized increasingly heavier tanks with larger caliber guns, American development focused on reliability, standardized parts, and system-wide integration. The M26 Pershing and its successor, the M48 Patton, embodied these principles, prioritizing functionality and operational coherence over raw specifications. NATO strategies during the Cold War explicitly reflected these lessons, particularly in planning to counter numerically superior Soviet armored formations. The tactical approach demonstrated by the 4th Armored Division, leveraging artillery, airstrikes, and maneuver to offset technically superior enemy units, became a foundational example of defeating a numerically dominant force through coordination and flexibility. Military historians today regard Arracourt as a turning point in armored warfare, the moment when the industrial-era emphasis on massed hardware began to yield to a more integrated, information-driven approach. American forces' ability to synchronize multiple weapons and communication networks in real time foreshadowed modern doctrines of network-centric warfare, where information dominance amplifies combat effectiveness. German post-war analyses of the battle were exceptionally critical. In the 1950 seconds, the Bundeswehr's historical section assessed the engagement and concluded that failures occurred at every echelon: strategic, operational, and tactical. Strategically, committing the last reserves to a secondary theater while the Eastern Front was collapsing reflected catastrophic misjudgment. Operationally, the hurried formation of panzer brigades without adequate training, logistics, or combined arms support ensured operational ineffectiveness. Tactically, rigid adherence to long-range tank doctrines ignored the realities of fluid battlefield conditions that required adaptability. These studies underscored a fundamental lesson: even technologically advanced forces cannot prevail without flexible, integrated, and well-supported operational planning. Interviews conducted in the 1960 seconds and 1970 seconds with German veterans consistently revealed their profound astonishment at the operational capabilities of American forces. They had anticipated confronting an army that relied primarily on material resources, expecting tactical deficiencies to balance American industrial strength. In practice, however, they encountered a military that was proficient across every dimension of contemporary warfare: tactical doctrine, technology, logistics, command, and leadership. Over the years, the Battle of Arracourt has accumulated a near-legendary status, often blurring the line between myth and historical reality. Tales of 5 Sherman tanks overcoming scores of Panther tanks, though rooted in actual skirmishes, risk overshadowing the broader, more critical truth. American success was founded on systemic strength rather than isolated acts of valor. The Sherman, frequently dismissed in popular narratives, demonstrated at Arracourt that winning a war depends on coordinated military systems rather than the capabilities of a single weapon. The Panther, despite its remarkable engineering, could not compensate for being merely one component of a larger battlefield equation. The Sherman thrived because it operated within a comprehensive combined arms framework, incorporating artillery, air support, infantry, and supply networks. The engagement underscored a key principle of modern warfare. Effectiveness arises from the integration of training, doctrine, logistics, technology, and leadership. No matter how advanced a single element may be, it cannot offset a deficit across the system as a whole. This principle remains pertinent as contemporary militaries navigate the tension between technological innovation and overall operational cohesion. Fought from September 18 to 29, 1944, the Battle of Arracourt represents more than a tactical victory. It was a demonstration of American military philosophy cultivated between the two world wars in practice. The underlying concept was that the inherent advantages of an industrial democracy, industrial output, organizational flexibility, and manpower could be translated into battlefield superiority through the methodical application of combined arms warfare. German forces arrived confident in both the technical sophistication of their equipment and the soundness of their tactical doctrines. The Panther, with its formidable gun and thick armor, appeared to promise decisive results against the lighter Sherman tanks. German crews, heirs to centuries of Prussian military tradition, assumed that superior skill and training would overcome the Americans' numerical and material advantages. What they encountered, however, was a fundamentally evolved form of warfare. The Americans did not rely solely on individual tanks. Instead, they conducted integrated operations where armor was just one component in a multi-layered system. Artillery, air support, intelligence, logistics, and communications all coalesced to create combat power far exceeding that of any single weapon. German survivors, profoundly shaken by the encounter, returned to the Reich with first-hand recognition that their preconceptions about battlefield superiority were obsolete. This was not a question of better tanks or braver soldiers. The courage of men on both sides was comparable, but a demonstration that the Americans had mastered the orchestration of multiple forces into a coherent and overwhelming system. Lieutenant Colonel Creighton Abrams and his 37th Tank Battalion epitomized this approach, proving that triumph in modern warfare derived from systematic coordination rather than isolated tactical brilliance. The 5 Shermans that morning, seemingly outmatched by Panther tanks, were in reality backed by the full weight of American industrial and logistical power, a force that would, in the months following Arracourt, grind Nazi Germany into unconditional surrender. The lessons of Arracourt were mirrored elsewhere on the front. German tankers realized, sometimes concurrently with prisoners in Allied camps, that American strength did not reside in a single weapon or maneuver. Instead, it emerged from the capacity to mobilize, supply, and synchronize forces precisely where and when they were needed. When German crews confronted the arsenal of democracy, they discovered it was far more than an armory. It was a fully operational system of war that rendered individual advantages nearly irrelevant. The battlefield surrounding Arracourt, scattered with the remains of destroyed Panthers, provided stark testimony. Tactical or technical excellence alone could not overcome a comprehensive, integrated approach to warfare. The German survivors returned to a disintegrating Reich with this sobering insight: the future of conflict was embodied in the American model, a synthesis of planning, coordination, and industrial capacity that had reshaped the art of war.